Holy guacamole, have I got a story for you. So these two girls went to a popular hiking trail for a day in the sun, and after crossing an old mysterious bridge, they literally just vanished without a trace. The police were able to track down the girls' final movements thanks to stories they had posted on their Snapchats, but they could have never imagined what else the girls could manage to capture on their phone minutes before they disappeared. Now on Sunday, February 12th, 2017, 13-year-old Abigail Williams and 14-year-old Liberty German had planned a sleepover at Liberty's house because they didn't have school the next day. Abigail and Liberty were BFFs, and they went by matching nicknames of Abby and Libby, which is about as adorable as it gets. These girls should have been the stars of a Disney Channel show, and instead they became more famous for something far more sinister. And we are making empanadas today. So what I have in my saute pan, I have bell peppers, black beans, and corn, and I'm about to season it with some onion powder, cumin, garlic powder, and salt and pepper. The reason they had the next day off was because they had built in snow days for the school schedule that year, but they had a mild winter, so this was just a fun little vacation day for the students, which come on, score. So the girls did all the typical fun activities that night. They had watched movies, filmed silly videos, ordered pizza, and of course stayed up way too late, which just about sums up every night of my life spent in quarantine, but for some reason mine sounds a lot more sad than theirs sounds a lot more fun. The next day, the girls woke up, had pancakes, and were left alone with Libby's grandmother when Libby's dad left for work. And the girls were a little bummed out about this. You know, grandmas aren't really exactly the first choice companions of preteens, but Libby's grandma made a deal with them. She said if the girls helped her file her paperwork, she'd give them a little bit of cash to go out shopping that day. And the girls were like, deal. So the girls whizzed through the filing, and at 1 in the afternoon, they asked Grandma if they could go hang out at the Monon High Bridge Trail. And Grandma said yes, but only if they were able to get a ride there and back. So the girls got Liberty's older sister, Kelsey, to drive them, but she told them that she could only drive them there and they need to find a ride home because she was going to her boyfriend's house before heading straight to work. So the girls called up Libby's dad and he agreed that he'd be their ride home from the trail and told them that he'd be done with his photography gig in about 2 hours. So there wasn't really an official meeting time, but the plan was that Libby's dad would call or text the girls when he was close and they would all meet at the trailhead. The appropriate time he said he'd be there was around 3 to 3:30 in the afternoon, so they would know what time they needed to start heading back to the trailhead. I'm taking my dough, I'm gonna roll it out, and we're gonna start making our dough for our empanadas. So at 1:30 in the afternoon, Kelsey took the girls to the entrance of Monon High Bridge Trail, said goodbye, and watched them walk until they reached the entrance of the trail, and then she drove off. From here is where the timeline gets a little patchy, and investigators have used evidence such as timestamps and videos on their social media to try to piece together the gist of what actually happened. So here's what we know. At some point, it's known that Abby and Libby started walking down the trail and reached the beginning of the bridge. At around 2:05 in the afternoon, Libby uploaded a picture of the Monon Bridge to Snapchat. At 2:07, Libby uploaded a picture to Snapchat again, this time of Abby walking on the bridge. Both of these were posted on Libby's story, so everyone who was friends with Libby on Snapchat saw it that day. And after these two pictures, Libby never posted to Snapchat again. At around 3:11 in the afternoon, phone records showed Libby's dad, Derek, called her to tell her he was getting close to the trail, but Libby never answered her phone. At 3:14, Derek pulled into the parking lot where the girls were nowhere to be found. He called Libby again, but still no luck. And at this point, Derek was straight up panicking because it was very unlike Libby to ignore text or phone calls. I mean, that thing was practically glued to her hand. And at that age, I was the same way, so I get how terrifying this must have been for Derek. I really feel for him. Well, Derek did what any dad would and parked the car so he could go search the trail for the girls. At 3:15 in the afternoon, Derek hit this point where two trails intersected, and he saw this guy in a flannel shirt coming down one of the trails. This guy actually became a key witness in the case and is lovingly dubbed by the internet as Flannel Shirt Guy, or FSG. So Derek asked Flannel Shirt Guy if he happened to see two young girls on that trail, and Flannel said he hadn't, but he did see a couple of kids on the bridge. Derek headed back towards the other trail since Flannel Shirt said he hadn't seen them on the one he just walked down from. Derek, of course, doesn't find the girls on that trail either, so he went back to the trail intersection and called up his mom, Libby's grandma, and asked if she had been able to reach either of the girls. So Derek went back towards the Freedom Bridge, and when he got there was no sign of the girls. So he, once again, went back to the intersection to try another way. And yeah, if you're getting frustrated with how many times this poor guy had to go back to this intersection to start over, imagine how frustrated and frantic he must have felt in the moment. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Derek returned to the parking lot completely defeated. And as the word continued to get around about the situation, more and more family members began showing up to the trails to aid in the search for the missing girls. Once the gang was all there, they theorized about different paths that the girls could have taken, and it's at this point they believed that the girls had somehow gotten hurt or fallen on the trail, losing or damaging their phones in the process. Which, can I just say, I hope that if anything happens to me, I would get the same response that Abby and Libby's families gave them. They knew that they had no time to waste and were out there searching the trails. They weren't going to wait for the authorities. They took it upon themselves. So the family did the classic Scooby-Doo move of splitting up to cover more ground, and they used the buddy system for safety. Although I'm sure the whole time they're thinking about how the buddy system wasn't safe enough to protect Abby and Libby. Kelsey and her boyfriend crossed the Monon High Bridge and arrived at the southeast end. They were able to see down the hill that there was like this private driveway, so they yelled the girls' names for 20 minutes but never got a response. I'm gonna take my filler and I'm gonna put it right into my empanada. Kelsey also tried calling Libby's phone to see if she could hear it ringing, but they didn't hear anything and weren't sure whether the phone was on silent or on vibrate. They also called their cell phone company to ask if they could ping Libby's phone to locate it, but the company says they can't do it for legal reasons. Well, like, if you have someone on the end of the line saying she's in the wilderness and her sister's missing, the phone company wasn't able to pull any strings for them? Come on, guys. Well, at 5:50 in the afternoon, the family called the police and Abby and Libby were officially reported missing. One of the worst parts about this story is that the entire time this search was happening, Abby's mom was at work and wasn't allowed to check her phone, so she had no idea what went down those last few hours. Abby's mom had the first free moment to check her phone at work around 5:25 in the afternoon and saw that her phone was completely overloaded with calls and messages. So she called back and agreed to meet Libby's family at the police station. Abby and Libby's case was then launched to the public, with the news being blasted to social media, so volunteers flocked to the area in order to help with the search. And at 6 in the afternoon, a massive search for the girls began. I know that people love to bag on our generation for being addicted to social media, but the fact that they were able to circulate photos and news of the girls so quickly and have hundreds of people show up that night should be proof enough that sometimes we choose to use our knowledge of trending and viral content for good. As the search continued, Kelsey was at the station with the police and showed them Libby's Snapchat story. Obviously, that's like a goldmine for investigators, who were then able to track the exact movements of the girls down to the second. So the cops then asked all the devices in the home so they could try to ping Libby's phone, which has got to be frustrating for Kelsey, because like, she tried to do that earlier, but because she didn't have the authority, I assume she just couldn't do it. I feel like there needs to be some type of way for people that they can prove that there's an actual emergency where they need to locate someone, because that poor girl had to wait for hours for the police to do it, and it probably felt like she was losing vital time. Well, at 10:29, it was officially reported to the public that the girls' cell phones were either dead or just turned off. Remember how Kelsey called her sister's phone and it was still on, so they listened for the ringing? Well, now it's too late for that, and I'm starting to get as heated as these empanadas. Officials also announced that they didn't think the girls had been met with foul play. They believed the two weren't in any immediate danger, and said the biggest concern at the moment was exposure to the elements. Yeah, they're not in any danger, they just might be frozen solid or something, no biggie. Now at midnight, the search was officially called off by law enforcement because apparently it was too dark and they were concerned for the safety of the volunteers, so they literally just paused everything and said they'd resume everything tomorrow morning. Despite the search being officially called off, firefighters and civilians continued to unofficially search throughout the night because they were like, we've got to find these girls. By 4:30 the next morning, the search was officially back on, and around noon, the searchers split up into different groups to comb the trails again. Libby's sister ended up in a group that went to the high bridge, where she and two others decided to cross the bridge and look under it on opposite sides. So Kelsey was standing there on the trail under the bridge, where she heard someone yell from the woods that they found a shoe and describe what it looked like. Kelsey's stomach dropped as she heard the person describe the shoe because it was Libby's. And then she heard the sentence that she had been simultaneously hoping and dreading to hear. I found them! The man who found the shoe started searching the area when he noticed these two deer standing over something on the ground, and the deer were just frozen there in place. He picked up his phone to take a picture of the deer and crept up closer, and that's when he saw the two bodies lying motionless on the grass in a small clearing between the trees. The girls were found on a private property about 50 feet from the shore of a creek, appropriately named Deer Creek. The only other thing that they noticed about the scene was a set of footprints leading to the bodies. The police then held a press conference announcing the discovery of the bodies. They didn't confirm their identities, but did say the suspected foul play based on the way that the corpses were found. Despite the whiplash the town was feeling from being told the girls weren't in any danger to the most recent news about the two bodies, the public was quick to speculate the identities of the Jane Does. The next day, autopsy reports confirmed the bodies to be Abigail and Liberty. I can't even imagine how terrified the town must have been. You think you live in this nice, safe neighborhood lined with trees and everyone knows everyone, and now you're hit with the fact that a monster in disguise could potentially be walking among you, and it could be someone you even know. Obviously, the public wanted to know if there were any details on who the potential monster could be, but police had to keep most of the details about the case private, a tactic in most early investigations. But then something incredible came out. Libby's phone had been found with the bodies, and they'd found photos and videos that hadn't been posted on Snapchat that day. Oh, and you know when investigators discovered this, they probably thought it was too good to be true or something. I mean, like, surely something had to be on there that would lead them towards some sort of a suspect. And did they ever? As they scrolled through the camera roll, they saw initially that the girls had taken pictures for fun. You know those like typical middle school photos you take with your bestie? Lots of peace signs, embraces, usually taken on the photo booth app. Then the detectives noticed the whole vibe of the photos and the videos changed at one point. It was clear that the girls started filming because they started to feel very uncomfortable, as if they wanted to film as a sort of precaution. The video was shot from Libby's perspective, and she was standing on the south side of the bridge looking backwards. The clip started off with the two chatting about ordinary stuff, and later on they both mentioned a man behind them on the bridge who appeared to be following them. The investigators were shocked at the cleverness of these girls and their instincts to start filming the moment that they felt that they were in danger. I think as we've learned, especially this year, that video evidence is some of the most damning evidence there is. Look, if there is some dude following you or creeping you out, you film that crazy and you have every right to do it. Take the lead from Abby and Libby. Where was I? Oh yeah, the video. So obviously the cops are stoked out of their minds about the discovery of this video, but they could have never prepared themselves for what the two brave girls would do next. For one brief, terrifying moment, Libby turned around and was able to record the man that was following them. I know, right? And this video is totally available online. There's been GIFs created of it, and it's been zoomed in, lightened, edited, and meticulously analyzed by professionals and web sleuths alike in order to try to see who this man is. But not only that, but Libby was able to get his voice on recording. In the video, you can distinctly hear a man's voice saying, "Guys, down the hill." Okay, so we know what the guy looks like. We know what he sounds like. This case should be a folding up as nice and easy as an empanada. You would think, right? Well, like I mentioned earlier, this case has remained unsolved to this day. So the police, now armed with the video and audio evidence of one of the last people to see the girls alive, decided to release it to the public in hopes that someone would recognize him. They released a portion of the video and audio, and once the town saw it, they just went loco. It also didn't help that the video was the super grainy shot of the man who had his head down and he's in a bunch of loose-fitted clothing. And what I'm saying is it's kind of impossible to tell what this person actually looked like. But you know who he does look like? Every average man you'd run into at the grocery store in your own town or the local Starbucks. And that was the whole problem. But experts analyzed the video and were able to get a few more substantial deets about their guy. They believe their suspect was a white male who weighed between 180 and 200 pounds and stood between 5'6" and 5'8". He's also described as wearing blue jeans, a blue jacket or a coat, and a hoodie. So again, pretty much any guy you'd run into anywhere. And now I'm gonna take my empanadas and throw them right into our oven. On July 17, 2017, police released a sketch of their main suspect, and it was this older looking man with a goatee and a hat and a hoodie. And as you can imagine, the calls came flooding in. It's my neighbor, it's my teacher, it's my landlord. But not a single tip came through that actually led detectives somewhere, and Abby and Liberty's case began to grow cold. Which really is just baffling. When you have video and audio evidence of the person who we are 99% sure committed this crime, how can this guy just vanish? Not a single person recognized the voice or the jacket. It's really mind-boggling. But then in April of 2019, the police released a new sketch of the suspect that looked completely different from the previous one. And the public was like, wait, what? In this sketch, the suspect was clean-shaven and looked a lot younger than the previous sketch of the old, chubby dude with the goatee. This was obviously through a lot of people and still had a lot of followers of the case scratching their heads. What new information could lead them to completely change the directions like this? At the same 2019 conference where the new sketch was revealed, officials said new information had led them to believe the killer was a native of Delphi and that he either still lives and works there or frequently visits the area. To this day, the Delphi slayings remain unsolved, but the police adamantly maintain that their investigation is ongoing and refuse to let the case grow cold. The police have also kept a lot of the details about the crime a secret, such as the way the girls were slain or if there was any DNA found at the scene. It can seem frustrating but an outsider's perspective, but this is often a tactic used by investigators to see how much of the person they have in custody knows. And nothing's more epic than that moment in the interrogation room when the suspect accidentally slips a detail that they shouldn't know, and the cop gets to do the whole thing. Most recently, investigators have theorized that a dude named James Chadwell may be responsible for the crimes. This is because James was recently charged for abducting and attempting to execute a 10-year-old girl 20 minutes away from Delphi, so there's that. But until a conviction can be made, the investigation remains ongoing and the tip lines stay open. The fact that Abby and Libby were smart enough to record this man seconds before he would actually allegedly attack them is something that makes me believe that this case would one day be solved. The bravery shown by the girls that day is something that will stick with me forever, along with that terrifying audio clip. Oof. A cold case like this should always be countered with some spicy empanadas, to balance it out. Well, until next time, biters.